Hey, fifth grade, we're going to jump into chapter 2 of Esther, and we're going to meet a couple of characters. We're going to meet Esther, and we're going to meet her cousin Mordecai. So Esther was this Jewish-born girl who was raised by her cousin Mordecai. And we're actually introduced to Mordecai first. And some scholars actually believe that the brief description of his genealogy here indicates that he descended from the same family as Saul, which is kind of interesting. Remember who Saul was? He was the first king of Israel. And his ancestors, so his relatives, had been carried away in what we call the Babylonian captivity, which is how the Jews came to live in Susa in the first place. So Mordecai has actually been faulted by some for allowing Esther to be taken into a pagan king's, basically to be the king's girlfriend for a while and ultimately his wife, hopefully. But there's nothing in here that indicates that Mordecai was like, okay, go ahead and take her. But Mordecai loved Esther like a daughter. And you'll see how Esther also treated Mordecai as if he was her father. So let's read chapter 2. And I have my big study Bible here. Esther, chosen queen. Now, after these things, when the anger of King Xerxes had gone away, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's so King Xerxes regretted his rash behavior, how he let his anger choose his actions. You guys ever been in that place before where your anger took over and the choice that you made might not have been the best choice to begin with? Well, he can't go back on his word now. So he's very, very upset that he kicked his wife out, basically. So the king's young men who attended to him said, well, let beautiful young girls be sought after for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all provinces of his kingdom. Remember how big his kingdom was? So all over that place, to gather all the beautiful young women and bring them back to the capital. And we'll put them under the custody of, I don't even know how to say this guy's name, Hegai, Hegai, and he'll be in charge of them. Let their cosmetics be given to them, so let them basically go to like beauty school, and let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the king said, okay, so he did so. So basically, the people the young men, problem one, who advised King Xerxes was like, you know what, forget about Vashti. You made a mistake, whatever. You can't go back on your word now. So let's go out to all your kingdom and find the most beautiful women and bring them back here. And we're going to make them even more beautiful. And from them, you choose one of them to be your new wife. And he was like, okay. So there was a Jew in Susa, the capital, whose name was Mordecai. Here he is. And they go through this genealogy, or like his family. He was the son of Jair, son of Shammai, son of Kish, son of Benjamite, and he had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives carried away, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. Remember Nebuchadnezzar, right? He was bringing up Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had she was beautiful and lovely to look at, and when her father and mother had died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in the custody of Hegai, remember that's the guy who's putting them through beauty school, basically, Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put there as well. And the young women pleased him and won his favor. And he quickly provided her, that's Esther, with makeup and a portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young women to the best place in this group of women. So Esther basically was brought in because she was beautiful. And while she was there, she excelled at everything that they had her do, all beauty related, and she was smart. And so she was chosen as like the top of the top, okay? Esther had not made known that she was Jew. And she did not make known that she was related to Mordecai. For Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known that she was a Jew. And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of all these girls to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. Why do you think that Mordecai advised Esther not to tell anyone that she was a Jew? We'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, when the turn came for each young woman to go to King Xerxes after being 12 months, so a year under these regulations for the women, so she was in preparation for almost a year just to go before the king. Girls, how does that make you feel? All right. Since this was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months with oil and myrrh, 6 months with spices and ointments, basically, I don't know, beauty remedies. When the young woman went into the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her from to the king's palace. In the evening, she would go in, and in the morning, she would return to the second group. And the king's, where am I at? She would not go in to the king again unless the king was happy with her and summoned her by name. Okay, so she went in front of him. He basically was like, let me see what all these girls look like. And if she was chosen, then she would get called back again. If not, kick her out too. So when the turn came for Esther, so that was kind of the process. Now it's Esther's turn. The daughter of Mordecai, who had taken her as his own daughter to go into the king, she asked for nothing except what Haggai, the king's guard, who had the charge of the women, advised. Now Esther was winning favor in the eyes of all who saw her. She didn't want anything elaborate. She just looked at the guy who was in charge and be like, what do you think I should bring? Okay. And when Esther was taken to King Xerxes in his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in the sight more than all the other girls, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great feast for all his officials and servants, and it was Esther's feast. He also granted a remission of taxes to the provinces, and he gave gifts with royal generosity. The power of a beautiful woman, right? She basically, the king instantly fell in love with her. And because of that, he made her queen right away, okay? Put a crown on her head and said, you know what? Vashti who? Esther, yes, okay? And he basically said, no more taxes for a while. And then on top of no taxes, I'm gonna give you back money, people. That'd be awesome, right? So here's where the plot thickens though, okay? Mordecai discovers that there's a plot, okay? So now when all these girls who weren't chosen were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Now that kind of indicates that Mordecai actually had a lot of power within this kingdom. Mordecai wasn't just someone who was sitting in the background, twiddling his thumbs like, oh, what's gonna happen to Esther? Like he actually was a part of the king's, possibly held a position of prominence in that area, okay? So Esther had not made known who her family was or that she was Jewish, as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's slaves, who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Xerxes. They wanted to kill King Xerxes. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther. And Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. So Mordecai heard this plot that these two people were going to go and try and kill the king, okay? And Mordecai was like, oh boy, I'm going to go and warn the king, but I can't go to the king because I don't have permission to just go and walk in to see the king. So who would be the next best person to tell? Well, how about the king's wife? So he goes and he tells his daughter, Esther, guess what? There's two guys that are plotting to kill the king. Go tell the king, okay? So Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai and said, my father, or this guy named Mordecai has told me that these men are gonna try and kill you. So when this was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows. Now the gallows are basically like sharp sticks they put in the ground, and they would like impale a person through the stomach and then stand them up on this stick. So the person would just be kind of like laying on this stick, okay? So they went and they put them on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Mordecai has saved the king. Is that going to come back to benefit him and Queen Esther? We'll find out. You're going to take this lesson and you're going to answer the questions that are below that Mrs. Houchin has posted, and you're going to email it to your teachers for your daily grade. All right.